I'm just going to do 15, 20 minutes, just pose a few, walk through the journey quickly and then pose a few questions, thoughts. So maybe people have got, I know, spoken to 2 or 3 people, different things on your mind. So don't want to dominate with one approach. So a bit about MUFG quickly. We're what's called a Japanese mega bank. We're one of the 3, SMBC and Mizuho, the other 2. We're 150,000 people globally. I always think it's a bit like a Barclays, but coming out of Japan. So it's a massive retail commercial investment bank. In Europe, which is where I'm mostly responsible, we have about 4,000 people all over Europe, and we do corporate investment banking. So we don't do retail in Europe. So the actual challenge that we had here was bringing together the investment bank or securities business, so sales and trading markets businesses, with the corporate bank, because we've integrated, merged, if you like, so brought those 2 businesses together. Very, very different cultures. Underlying that was a Japanese-owned, shareholded business with a mixture of some Japanese leadership and not. We're more Western, I'd say, than Japanese. If I just go back to where we started there, so business imperatives, we decided we've got to build sustainable profitability. So the Joint Management Committee sat in a room for 6 hours. That's quite tough to get us in a room for 6 hours, an on-site, off-site, where we basically ploughed through, with Walking the Talk's guidance, to these 3 goals. So we want to optimise our risk appetite and approach. Really means change our approach to risk appetite. We've got to take more risk. So that's quite a big thing for us and with the people in Tokyo. Build one MUFG, that's bringing us all together, and then build sustainable profitability. So have we got a sustainable business? Bearing in mind what I said about the market's change for us, we're now competing heavily with many other of the global banks. 4 years ago, we were out there with just a few Asian banks, really. So we've got to make it more profitable, which is linked to more risk appetite. And we'll only do that if we work together as one business serving clients. So it all made sense. Our cultural goals, once we'd done that, we then spent a couple of hours going, right, what are our cultural goals to achieve that? So again, trying to make it a science. Do your business first. How do you drive it? It's almost the same with a people strategy sitting next to the business strategy. So one team, MUFG, customer centricity and achievement. So make people accountable, deliver more, less about process. And I'll come on to that. And then we use these, we broke it down then. So once we got that framework set up, we then went for game changers. So lead by example, I'll come on to those. Strategic alignment, efficient, effective decisions, and collective engagement. So breaking it down into, I'd say, work streams that we could then deliver those. And at the bottom of it, communication engagement. This has become, everybody talks about this and wants to do it brilliantly, but it's so easily not done brilliantly, and it's never done either. So we're really, really focusing on it, and everybody has their targets on communication, and we've hired a new communications director, corporate director. So we're doing all the right things, but still everybody blames communication as not, we should be able to solve it through communication. I think it's just something you have to keep doing and doing and doing. So this is quite an interesting slide, worrying slide. If you have a quick look at that, this caused a bit of a stir, actually. We basically decided that we did a survey with Walking the Talk, and this is what came up as our archetypes. So these are, I think, 6 traditional archetypes that you look at that are sitting within the organisation. And we were a greater good. So the purpose of MUFG really is a community-based organisation. So in Japan particularly, we're very good in the community and looking after, charitable almost. So that became, we liked the fact we were good in the community. Now that's fine, but is that going to drive a high-performing integrated organisation? Perhaps not. We're very nice to our people. I was just talking with someone outside around, we're a nice place to work. Now that means people come to us and tenure is respected and honoured, because in the Japanese organisation, their culture is all about tenure and hierarchy to age, actually, as opposed to seniority, but the two come together. So actually, if you're a long server in the organisation, then you're honoured and respected, notwithstanding what you're doing. So part of our job was to try and change that balance. So putting these two down here at 4th, 5th, 5th, 6th doesn't mean we don't agree with them. It just means we have to change the emphasis. And I think we were talking here around you've got to be countercultural. You've got to change the culture, otherwise nothing will change. So if you continue doing this and just try and do it better, you're not going to change anything. So we had to switch it. We're not particularly innovative, or for a bank, we don't want to be too innovative. That's seen as almost like a dirty word, because you might be taking too much risk. We're not creating lots of new products. So we switched it to this, because that's, after much debate, we all voted on this, all the Joint Management Committee, and this is where we ended up. So we are shooting for being more customer-centric, one team and achievement. And all this made us do was focus on these three. So we did everything we do now. This is classic, sort of, once you've got them, focus on them and do everything to do these three. And if it doesn't fit those three, then don't do it. Now, some challenge us to bid on people first. So when I've spoken about this with a couple of other organisations, and there's one particular organisation that preaches a tribal mentality, which is basically all about the people, look after the people and create their high-performing people, and then all of this will follow, which is a reasonable argument. But we thought we were just too about the people. We had very low attrition. We had some of our KPIs, people were stopping doing performance management. It was all started atrophying, everything. So we needed to switch it. This is our chairman, absolutely inspirational man, Hirano-san, or Nobu Hirano. He also sits on the board of Morgan Stanley. Game-changing initiative. So I said effective decision-making. We've got a mini project called Project Spring, which is trying to simplify governance. So what happened with that is we got all of our teams, let's say there's 30 divisions, 30 departments, including everything, and they got small teams in each, 4 or 5, and they got all of their processes that they do through regular processes and put them all into a system where we've got a head of data management and MI who works in finance, who's basically been plowing through it. So there's about 1,300 processes. And basically we've been going through all of them and lean engineering them all. So we've taken the top 200 that take the most time and taken them from, I don't know, there was a mortgage product that was 1,300 steps from customer to end, and now it's 33, something like that. So that's an example of what are the biggest time wasters. We've been given permission by Hirano-san to look at time wasting and eradicate it. That's been very successful, and it's hugely engaging for people because they can put their process in that they don't understand why they're doing it, and out pops with their work a leaned process that now makes a bit more sense. So that was an example of that. Leading by example, we did a lot of work with the JMC, Joint Management Committee, so we did 360-degree feedback. We had a lot of work with walking the talk, I'd say personal coaching. Each one of them has had personal sessions, at least 1 or 2 or 3, around client centricity, one team and achievement. So everything's focused around that. All their objectives now are set around centricity, one team achievement. They are having to show their behavioural change in order to move to those. So what am I doing differently is the question they're challenged all the time. What did I do before? What am I doing differently now? So for example, in meetings, so we took away all the need for that nemawashi I mentioned and the pre-meeting, and also it's very, I think, slightly lazy. When you go into a Japanese organisation and you go to a meeting, there's the presentation and deck in front of you sitting there at your desk, rather than soft copying it to you or taking your iPad. So that people were traditionally, you just come and I think people get lazy, they don't read the deck, and then they have it in front of them and they turn the pages and then they don't contribute, and that's just not acceptable. So we've changed all of that. So now you have a pre-read, you come and we go straight to discussion points. It's really difficult to do in an organisation which is used to having a structure. So the leadership have all signed up to quicker meetings. We haven't gone to the sort of taking tables and chairs away and all standing yet, which is, I think, a little bit difficult. But we've definitely gone in and said, right, what are we doing? What's different in this meeting? And tried to challenge ourselves on the cultural goals at the start. So we talk about client centricity, achievement, and one team. And you can actually put that at the top of all of the agendas if you want to. You have to find some ways to methodically bring it in scientifically. So you could say all meetings, first 3 agenda items are on these 3 to make us talk about clients. So even we had a town hall 3 months ago and we got the head of sales up and he spoke about our top 10 clients and the volumes of work we're getting off it. And we got so many questions about that, and so many people were saying, well, I've never heard of these clients. Basically investor-based and corporates, we have two. So it's at least getting out there that we have an ultimate reason for being in the organisation. The last thing on this, we basically went down to 100 people. So if you take 4,000 people in the organisation, we went down to 100, which is most of the managing directors. They've all been trained. So they've all had sessions with Walking the Talk, group and personal sessions. They've all got a 360 questionnaire. They've all got objectives around client centricity, achievement, and one team. So they're all, now what I call them is slightly the sleepers. We need to be awakened a little bit, and that's the current point of our journey. So we need to use those 100 to be in everything around the organisation, talking about the culture. And about half of them get it. So they've been leading latterly some workshops with the next layer down and trying to get them engaged on behavioural change. But then the other half is sort of, it's not really for me, I'm going to go back and do my trading, which is to a degree okay, but we're not going to tolerate it forever. So they've got to all have a role, even if they're not buying into culture, of changing it. So this 100 are the change agents that our job now is to activate them as many places as we can. Symbols, so I just thought I'd mention it because it's quite amusing. There's some changes we've had to make. So travel and expenses is a good one. So broker-dealer securities, I talked about the snobbery, they would go, so the head of sales coverage, so a corporate client person would go on a plane to, let's say, Russia, and would turn right on the plane to the economy class. The person selling the product, the derivative product, who would be going on the sales pitch would turn and sit on the left-hand side. That person was a VP. The head of sales is an MD. But the bank, so there was, and this causes huge issues, obviously. So we've had to align the travel and expenses, and that doesn't mean everybody going into business. We've just done what everybody else is doing, which is if it's under 5 or 6 hours, you go economy. If it's not, then you go business, but. So it's allowed us to be a bit pragmatic. But if you think about it, remote access, dress code, so actually securities business quite dressed down, markets generally, and it's got quite sloppy. So, we've tried to bring it back up, at least to smart casual. But people don't like that. So if you start to look at this, what we're doing is we're changing culture, but big question for us is what is in it for the securities people? Because they had it quite good. So we're having to say, well, this is professionalising the organisation and bringing us all together. And some of those people, which is one of a consequence of cultural changes, some people have left who are securities people. So it's not for everyone, and I think you have to expect attrition to go up. We've gone from about 5% to about just about 10 or 11, which for me is fine. 10% attrition, depends where it is, but it seems fine. But we think that's quite high in a Japanese organisation because we're not used to a lot. So. But I don't think you're succeeding unless some people are leaving, personally. But you have to take some tough decisions. You can't avoid that. These things matter. So communication engagement. So we've changed the way we do town halls. It used to be the CEO just speaking. We're now panel sessions, all sorts of different people speaking, focusing on client, one MUFG achievement. And we've got the Pulse Committee, which is about 40 people who are in the junior ranks, I'd say 3 to 7 years in the organisation, who are really interested in it. And they're basically, we've had them invite a friend to the next one, so there's now 80 of them. We're trying to get it a bit more viral at the bottom, so the junior level. And that's sort of working. Where we're missing a beat, where we currently are, 15 months in, is the middle management. So this is what everybody, the permafrost, the mezzanine layer, whatever it is, it's people who run the business, really, people who make the decisions, who have got teams. They are critical. And I think we haven't quite cracked them yet. We've gone top end and we've gone this, and they're both in for it. It's this next one down saying, well, I've been here 15 years and I'm not changing. So we're now going after them. That's our current strategy, to try and get as many of them engaged. But that's probably about 200 to 300 people who are running teams, making decisions, and they're key decision makers. So we need to use the 100 sleepers, the MDs, and we need to use the Pulse Committee to bottom up. And part of it is getting the management team to sign up to the fact that may get some attrition at some of their key producers level. Strategic alignment, we've pushed it into all of our models. So everything on performance management, we now lead with the strategic house, which has got the cultural goals in. So that this is making sure it's cascaded through the whole organisation. This is a bit desktop, so it's done. So it's all through the organisation, but it's like if anybody opens a document, you'll see it. So it's reinforcing, I think. And then this was tricky because this was trying to get the clients, so the sales bit of your organisation, to say what's not working with the middle and back office. Now that's quite tricky because the middle and back office say that's not your right to say that. I'm a control function, or however you work in your organisations. You can't tell me that I'm not controlling you properly. So, you shouldn't have rights on it. But we were trying to get it from a client perspective. So I'm a client looking into MUFG. I meet the salesperson. How's the risk function, compliance and operations working to make the client have the best experience? So I think it was a fair question to answer. It just created quite a lot of uncertainty. But we got there in the end. And we've now got heat maps of where we think we need to improve in the middle and back office. This is the last slide. You'll be pleased to know. I'll get to this in a minute. So lots of these things are good. Speedy integration. So key on it, if you're merging or integrating, then it's co-location, co-mingling. So we went straight for most departments we selected people to lead teams who could have been securities or bank. So we've now got combined teams. The longer you leave, co-mingling is sort of sitting on the same floor but not really working together, because you say the processes are different or the systems are different. If you can bring everybody together and integrate quickly, I do think that big bang, although there's some pain at the start, it bears fruit as you try and bring the culture together. Meetings I've talked about, sponsorship I've talked about at the top, new leadership behaviours, so emerging. So what are the important behaviours? We're just trying to crystallise those for the middle management. What is it they've got to do differently? What are the 3 or 4 behaviours that we want? Not just open, simple, speedy, not just acting for the client, but what does it actually mean? What am I going to do differently? So we're just honing those at the moment. Senior torchbearer, so that's in the sponsorship, and then the New Look Town Hall. We've done a lot more media around the place, and everything's got the same message on it. So we've really blitzed it and spent a bit of money, but I think you have to. So the challenges, hone is another Japanese word, really. This is quite a good picture of it. It's basically the honesty. So actually, a Japanese person, traditionally, if you ask them what they think, will not tell you to your face. So you have to find another way to get to them. Or I've got to a point with this bank CEO where I'll say, I need some hone on this. I need the honesty. And if you ask for it specifically, sometimes you can get it. A lot of people traditionally say you need to go out for food and drink. And eventually the hone comes out. It's probably the same for all of us as you loosen up. But hone is important because you needed to know, otherwise we're just feeling our way. And Asian cultures generally is, well, what do they really think? I need to know sometimes. So I think that's been a challenge. Need for more tangible targets. So we've got the mid-years coming up. These are inflection points where we can really nail it. So we can say exactly what we're all doing for the 3 cultural goals. Cost constraints. So we're in a bit of a tough time generally in the market in terms of costs. Some of you in organisations, I suspect you're always looking at your cost base. We're in a particular position where our costs are a little bit too high. Our cost-income ratio is a little bit too high. Our return on equity, etc. So doing this in a cost-constrained environment really tricky. If you're doing it when the business is flowing, it's probably easier. So we've had to, rather than people saying, it depends, I don't know what the solution to this is. I'm just saying that if you're in a cost-constrained environment, people will look to the changes as saying that's just cost saving. That's not cultural integration. So can they disentangle the two? It's quite difficult. That doesn't mean don't do it, because I don't think we've got any choice, but I think it's just one to be very aware of in your messaging. So we try and message around cultural goals separate from any cost initiatives. But it's difficult. And always, this is the one for all of us, the high producing MD who doesn't turn up to meetings. The CEO particularly has got to say, I'm not tolerating that. So this is giving the CEO some ammunition, some tools and framework to give them. And if they're not naturally into that, they've got to call out the senior producer. Because we've had a couple who've not turned up to a couple of meetings, and it's a massive symbol. So they need to be captured. They can't just produce and not behave. But it's a classic one of the city for years. Can we actually help those people, or are we going to tolerate them? And eventually, if we don't, they've got to go. But in a Japanese organisation, they will be tolerated because of longevity and seniority. So a bit of a clash.